We're going to hear next from Philip Ridley, who's from the Campaign for Real Milk, with his view of the market and the view of consumers. Philip.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here and meet the board and the chief executive of the FSA for the first time. The Campaign for Real Milk is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and we campaign for wise traditions in food and farming. In particular, there's a focus on restoring nutrient-dense foods to our diet. And one of the foods that we believe is extremely nutrient-dense is unpasteurized milk from grass-fed cows. Now, I don't know if everyone can see that. I wanted to start off with the statistics on outbreaks. Now, this chart is in the consultation document. No outbreaks at all since 2002. And I would like to say first that the FSA should congratulate itself for a sterling job at regulating unpasteurized milk sales. We, at the Campaign for Real Milk, do not believe that all drinking milk should be unpasteurized. Indeed, we are very much supportive of regulated sales. And by regulated sales, the FSA register producers. They have a much higher level of testing for the cows. And not only that, but a huge difference, which I don't know if it was covered so much, and it's forgivable because it's not actually the remit of the FSA, it is the food production facility status of the milking parlour and the bottling facilities for raw drinking milk from registered producers. These, unlike with milk that goes to pasteurisation, those facilities are registered food production facilities which are regulated by local hygiene inspectors, treated in much the same way as a kitchen. So I think that may explain some of the incredible statistics in really bringing this down to a low-risk food. Now, this chart, though, I do have some critique of it. The chart does not differentiate between registered and non-registered herds. As far as we know, all of the outbreaks on here are from unregistered raw drinking milk, and certainly before 1985, those outbreaks are from unregistered herds because the restrictions were not in place. So as far as we know, there has never been an outbreak from a registered herd with food production, quality, milking and bottling facilities. And notice that there are outbreaks in Scotland following the ban. This is because unregulated milk is unregulated, and there is a concern of ours that if there were it was a ban in the UK, that we may end up in a situation where people are sourcing milk from unregulated farms, and we certainly don't want to see that. The statistics also, and I heard previously that these are being used to inform policy. Through a Freedom Information request, we discovered that the FSA has never seen the raw drinking milk outbreak reports. These are filed by local inspectors. And so we don't really know. We tried to get hold of these, but we haven't been able to. There could be an association, there could be a proven link, we don't know. And we also don't know, really anything about any of these outbreaks. On the request, it turned out that Public Health England are responsible for these. And on requesting them, they said they rarely see the outbreak reports because they're owned by the local authority who rarely hand them over. We also discovered that pre-1992, this is a quote from Public Health England, that the pre-1992 statistics are unstandardised and not comprehensive. So we don't really feel that they are fit for purpose for policy creation at the moment. And one of the recommendations we would make is to have a more rigorous reporting process where the outbreak reports are made public and are stored by Public Health England and kept for a period of time, because the historic outbreak details are being used for policy formulation. From our experience in America in particular, raw milk, drinking milk, because of its reputation, is often treated as a scapegoat with, for example, simply that somebody has drunk raw milk. Sometimes there's an association assumed, but then when we look through it, there's no actual proven link. So we do feel that the chart exaggerates risk and unfortunately is not fit to inform policy, and we do seek to have a re-look at some of the statistics. Incidentally, we're talking about increased restrictions on non-bovine milk, and none of the statistics actually point out the non-bovine outbreaks. And so far as I understand, there hasn't been anything since the early 1980s, and as said, we're not privy to the outbreak reports from those. Here's also from a Freedom of Information request on comparing the relative outbreaks. Clearly, much higher outbreaks from fruit and veg, egg, seafood, red meat, chicken, and also a large range of other foods, which could include rice, hot food takeaways, etc. On this chart in particular, only 3 outbreaks from raw dairy products since 92, that's 23 years. Number of people affected, well, because raw drinking milk is generally sold locally, and it's not a mass product, the number of people affected are extremely low over the period. And number of deaths, there's actually been 0 deaths from any dairy from foodborne pathogens for 23 years on any dairy product. So whereas some of the consultation documents have stated that raw milk is inherently dangerous, I would actually say that the evidence suggests that dairy as a food group, properly regulated, is actually inherently safe. And you know, we're allowed to sell raw oysters, and yet, you know, there's no restriction on third-party retail of that, but the seafood is actually coming up quite high. Not that I'm seeking to ban raw oysters, but I think that we need a consistent approach, and I believe that's one of the things that the FSA is seeking to achieve in looking at various approaches to harmonisation. And if we compare it against other leading causes of death, this is for 2012, averaging out the outbreaks per year, I've been generous rounding it up, as an average of 17 outbreaks per year from dairy products. And as I said, 0 deaths, but we have heart disease killing 35,000 deaths in what we looked at. I think the statistics in America, we analysed them, it was something like 35,000 times more chance of driving to the farm than it was consuming, of dying from food poisoning at all. So the question we would ask is, since there are actually quite a lot of high-risk foods which can be retailed and which should be properly regulated, as said, we're very much for and support the FSA's sterling work at regulating dairy products. We do feel that there should be a 5th option in exploring how regulations could look into expanding into giving farmers the liberty to retail their products, maybe in the local village shop or so forth. So we're looking at an evidence-based policy. From the statistics that I provided, I'd say that there's no evidence at all for a ban on raw milk. It would be certainly overbearing. There's a concern that use of the word harmonisation. It will ban non-bovine raw milk retail, presently Ellie's Dairy, Debbie is here from there, have been retailing frozen raw milk nationwide in reasonably high volumes in health food stores. You can find it in the freezer cabinet. No outbreaks, no concerns that have been raised. I think this needs to be looked into in terms of informing policy. I also won't name the store, but there's a very high-profile organic store selling local goat's milk that I've purchased from personally. Again, no evidence of an outbreak. And we're planning to maintain a ban on bovine raw milk drinking, yet no evidence at the moment of harm. And as I said, part of that process is the proper regulation. From the raw drinking milk consultation, I quote that it stated that there is an inherent food safety risk associated with raw drinking milk and cream. Given the evidence base, it doesn't, I wonder what level of risk we're talking about here. And there's a bit of confusion, I think, with the microbiology board that's advising the FSA have stated that the absence of evidence of diseases associated with raw milk and cream was not equivalent to the evidence of absence. And I think that given the approach taken with other raw foods like steak tartare, raw oysters, various other things, I don't feel that approach is consistent with the dealings with other raw foods that are available for sale and have been available for thousands of years. And I do feel that there needs to be more of a link up with the FSA's strategy, which states that we aim to be science and evidence-based in everything we do. Just very briefly, I wanted to go into some of the specific safety features that are naturally within raw milk. Consider a mammal with a baby, and it's generally unhygienic conditions in the wild, say. So how do these animals survive? Well, it's because raw milk contains multiple natural redundant systems of bioactive components that reduce, eliminate populations of pathogenic bacteria. This element hasn't really been discussed yet. Raw milk is the only raw food product, other than probably raw honey, that actually has an inbuilt immune system. I'll just very briefly go over some of these, and all of these factors are inhibited by pasteurization. We have B lymphocytes that kill foreign bacteria. Macrophages engulf foreign proteins and bacteria. Neutrophils kill infected cells, mobilize the immune system. Antibodies bind to foreign microbes and prevent them from migrating outside the gut. Bifidus factor promotes lactobacillus, which helps crowd out germs. This is well known in the cheese making and yogurt making industry. The acidification of dairy is well known as being protective, which is why they aren't restricted as such. Lactoferrin contributes to iron absorption, actually reducing the availability to iron-loving pathogens such as tuberculosis and candida. Lactopyrodoxidase uses hydrogen peroxide, releases that to help destroy fungi and viruses. And this is a very important point because goat's milk is 10 times more rich than cow's milk in lactopyrodoxidase. So that's one piece of evidence to suggest that, in fact, harmonization may not necessarily fit the evidence. There's a number of other factors there, but these are destroyed by heat treatment, and it's one of the reasons why mother's milk is known to pass on the immunity to the baby, and which is why in human babies we do encourage breastfeeding, which is from raw milk. So there's various studies on peer-reviewed journals of inoculating raw milk with pathogens. And what we find is, here's a chart from a This is from Applied Environmental Microbiology, where 20,000 grams of the equivalent Campylobacter found in 20,000 grams of manure add to chilled milk. We can see the chart there, the reduction in the pathogens. The bovine strain decreased by 100 cells in 48 hours, and poultry strains decreased by 10,000 cells in 48 hours. And the only strain that did not decline was a non-human strain. Here's another test from another journal. Lactoparadoxase in raw milk kills added fungal and bacterial agents. And in a challenge, adding Campylobacter jejuni in a challenge test, it kills that. And there aren't many, other than, like I said, raw honey, there really aren't any other raw food products which will achieve this under controlled conditions. Here's a number of other tests. I won't really go through these, but they're all available. We have a number of tests. As I said, these are from peer-reviewed journals, and they, I think it's very relevant. In particular, some of the products that you find in raw milk are being actively, particularly lactoparadoxase, is being actively sought after as a alternative to pasteurization in some countries, and a spray has been approved by the Food and Drug Administration in the States for destroying pathogens in meat products. So there's a 5-fold protective system in raw milk, which we do believe needs to be analysed. There's a lot of journal articles which I'd love to share with the FSA afterwards, which demonstrate that the protective system destroys pathogens in the milk, stimulates the human's immune system, helps build a healthy gut wall, prevents absorption of pathogens and toxins in the gut, and also ensures assimilation of nutrients, which I'll go into in a second. Here's one example. Some of the quote which says that the absence of evidence isn't evidence of risk. I think that needs to be taken into context with the international situation. For example, organic pastures in California have sold over 40 million servings of organic unpasteurized milk from grass-fed cows. Within that period, not one confirmed illness in over 1,300 tests, no pathogen found in the milk. And we do have this data. We're happy to share it. This is milk that is retailed in health food stores across California. One of the things that we're concerned with, which I don't feel has been taken into account, is the opportunity cost, because there are factors which are reduced, as well as the immune factors, some of the nutrients which are reduced. I'll focus on vitamin C here. This is from the Journal of Pediatrics, and it's a 2001 article. A quote there saying that raw milk, but not pasteurized, can resolve scurvy because vitamin C is reduced by heat. Without doubt, the explosive increase in infantile scurvy during the latter part of the 19th century coincided with the advent of the use of heated milks. Again, these are all of these nutrients that are reduced. We have journal articles backing that up, and I'm happy to share those. One of the factors in the consultation is harmonisation of the Welsh and the English labelling, and it will warn that we shouldn't be providing this to infants. Well, here again are some journal articles showing that babies do not gain as much weight fed pasteurized milk versus unpasteurized. And I'd like to move on to asthma, which actually kills, I believe, about 5 times more than people than all cases of food poisoning combined. And what I'm going to cover here, this is a massive opportunity cost that, and here we have journal articles from respected journals showing that unpasteurised milk can be protective. Incidentally, I had a conversation with Prince Charles when I visited Highgrove and mentioned the campaign for real milk. And his remark to me was that he did believe that a lot of the allergies are to do with an over-obsession in sterilising all of our environment. And that's a sentiment which I would tend to agree. And it is notable that the royal family do have their own herd and do consume unpasteurised milk. I won't go into all these articles because I don't have time, but here's another one from the Journal of Allergy, of Clinical Immunology, another journal article here with 14,000 children tested, showing that raw milk was the strongest factor that they found in reducing the risk of asthma and allergy. And it's precisely the exposure to the immune factors within raw milk which we believe have this protective factor. Just as you have the same effect when you feed a baby with breast milk, and we know this there. So there's another journal article. I won't go into all those because there's quite a lot there. But if there were one life saved from asthma from somebody drinking raw milk, you compare that against 0 deaths for milk at all. And these are stats for America, 5,500 people dying from asthma a year. And we do follow America with a lot of trends, and I really don't want to see that here. Raw milk can digest itself. The activated enzymes help to digest. When you leave raw milk on the counter, it acidifies, it turns into a fermented product, and the same happens in the gut. So a lot of people who have lactose intolerance find that they can tolerate raw milk. And there are also factors which aid the digestion of casein. Now, the factors are there because baby mammals are born without the ability to digest food. That's why it's a while until we can feed solid food to babies, and the same with all mammals. So raw milk has these factors, and the heat destroys those. So to summarise, we believe that research has shown that there's a very significant difference between the nutritional value of unpasteurised milk versus pasteurised. I think the consultation documents merely mentioned that there's a minor impact on the protein content. Certainly the journal articles I've quoted have not been reviewed. Research shows no evidence of risk from registered raw milk producers and clear benefits from children, and we're talking about major articles in the Lancet showing that in particular asthma, but there are other elements. We mentioned scurvy, which is one of the reasons why the British government started providing raw milk after World War II to children. Yet the review proposes adopting Welsh warning labels, warning mothers and children to avoid raw milk. We don't have that same consistent approach to other raw food products, such as oysters, such as steak tartare, various raw foods which are available, and in fact salads, which we showed, salad is raw, and there's a lot of outbreaks from salads compared to dairy at all. And we believe that the additional red tape, therefore, and the cost for farmers is really overbearing. And it concerns us, given that from what I've seen, we're losing about 6 dairy farms a week. And a lot of that is down to the fact that bulk milks are being sold at a massive discount to wholesalers, whereas when farmers are empowered to sell milk direct, instead of selling it for 25 pence a litre, we have farmers selling it from anything between £1.50 to £3 a litre. And it's precisely those economics which allow the farmers to invest in proper animal husbandry, proper farming practices, organic farming, food hygiene, and we really want to see that improve. One of the other options, just to finish, I think that from my understanding, the thing that precipitated part of the study was that Dairy UK were calling for a ban, they released press releases a couple of years before this, so I know that may have been on the radar of the FSA. Now, we believe that is coming from a different perspective, and that focus on the question of to be or not to be for raw milk has really hid away from the very detailed study that I would personally like to see. I think that we should be looking at the actual process of regulation and saying, and I've spoken to a number of farmers who suggest that the testing regime, we could be testing for more things, we could be making the tests more available, lower cost for the farmers. I know, for example, that a lot of farmers are being able to test for more pathogens at a lower cost from private testers. And there's factors like that we need to look into, and also how the regulations could expand to other forms of regulation. But on a very positive note, I would like to really invite people here to give a round of applause to the FSA for looking at the statistics. They're doing a very good job at regulating dairy products and raw dairy products. We'd like to see that continue. And I would like to give a round of applause to congratulate them on the absence of outbreaks. So I think that's a really good accolade.
Philip, thank you very much. Are there any points anybody would like to raise? Yes, there's a lady in the middle there, if the microphone could reach. If you could say who you are and then address.
I'm Elizabeth Hunt. I'm a consumer. Basically, I'd also ask, there's a lot of information has come from the presentations, and I actually am asking the chair, really, can these presentations be available to us to actually be able to look at, to be able to digest, because some of the information was difficult to actually concentrate on. And I would actually like to be able to go home and look at my email and get the presentations, and to be able to look at them and to digest them properly.
I'm looking around in answer to see if there's a ready answer to that. I'm assuming the answer is yes. Lots of nodded heads from the FSA at the front here. So I think the answer to that is yes. So that's the answer on that one. I'm told all of them. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, gentleman here.
Richard Coates, co-founder of the Campaign for Real Milk. Am I not right in thinking that a few years back an exemption was put in place for small farmers producing less than a certain number of litres a week just be able to sell in their local shops? I know the Isle of Scillies have an exemption, and I think there are one or two other village shops in England which actually sell on that basis. I remember speaking to someone at the FSA probably about 8 or 9 years ago on this.
Is that a point you wanted to put to Philip, or more generally?
Well, I don't know if Philip...
I'm aware of that, and there is a lower threshold below which the regulations don't apply, but clearly those farms would still be inspected by their local food hygiene inspector, and so there would still be a certain level of...
Because what I'm thinking of, this is something we could possibly expand on the secondary sales that you were talking about earlier on.
Sure. I mean, by all means, raise that again in the second half, sir, if you wish. You don't feel we've dealt with that sufficiently now. Yes, there's a lady at the front here, and then I'll move on to our next speaker, because I'm conscious of the clock.
Hello, Sara Novakovic. I'm here from Oliver's Whole Food Store. Just talking about the slides, where are they available on a website? What is the website?
Can I answer for mine?
Yeah.
Just very brief. If you go to realmilk.com and you look for raw milk presentation, that's realmilk.com. That presentation is actually 150 slides long, and we do have a lot more information. But there's also a lot of information on westernaprice.org, and I'm sure that the FSA will be putting out the presentation that I've put forward, and everybody else's.
Philip, thank you very much for the time being. As I say, plenty more chance in the second half for further discussion on any of the points that have been raised so far.